The following program was produced for the Focus on the Family daily radio broadcast, featuring psychologist and author Dr. James Dobson. This program is entitled Respect, a Marriage Essential, and originally aired in October of 2003. Now, here's how this program got underway. Welcome to Focus on the Family. I'm John Fuller, and our host is psychologist and author Dr. James Dobson. And as you may know, during the course of this month of October, we've been devoting a lot of our airtime to the importance of marriage. And along the way, we've covered a lot of different subjects, from why marriage matters and the meaning of love to how to prevent infidelity and how to love an unbelieving spouse. The topic, though, that we're going to turn our attention to today is, I think, going to catch your attention and cause you to stop and cause you to think.
We are going to do some thinking today, John, and I think it'll be very beneficial. I have shared this with you before. You're going through the same thing, that when you are heard on 1,500 stations across North America, maybe 2,000 facilities, and then another 3,000 around the world. People know that, and they're constantly sending you books or tapes or materials, and sometimes I feel overwhelmed by that because I just can't keep up with all that.
Yeah, it's hard to go through and even track what's been submitted, let alone review it and respond to people.
It really is, and I try to get help with it. But I have a good friend, a hunting buddy of mine. We hunt pheasant together, named Kevin Cusack. He's married to Meg. This is a great family. And Kevin has kind of been on my case to listen to a tape that he had available from a Dr. Emerson Eggerichs. Many people know him around the country, but I had not met him. And Kevin just wouldn't let go, and so we have now listened to the tape that Kevin sent to me, and he is dead right. This is something that our listeners ought to hear, and we're going to let them hear it today. Dr. Eggerichs was the senior pastor of East Lansing Trinity Church in Lansing, Michigan, until he began leading and speaking at Love and Respect conferences around the country. And it was at one of those conferences that a recording was made of the message that we're about to hear today. And so I don't want to take any more of his time. Let's listen.
This is challenging stuff, sure to be thought-provoking. Let's listen in now as Dr. Emerson Eggerichs speaks to a group of women at one of those Love and Respect conferences.
In a wife's view, what does it mean for her husband to be motivated? That's your first question. Well, it seems to me, from the research I've done, I've got a PhD in family study, and all those years as a senior pastor, we had a church of 2,000, had a paid staff of 40. We just were relocating to 40 acres when this illumination came to me, and we left that to get this message out, and we're very excited about it. But the bottom line answer to this particular question is, I believe your desire is for him to be motivated to love you. That's why you see so much in Scripture that the husband is commanded to agape love his wife, right? You see it in Colossians, you see it in Ephesians, all of these scriptures that talk to men about loving their wives in that unconditional way. But did you know that there is nowhere in the Scripture you're commanded to agape love your husband? And yet there are thousands of Bible studies all over America that instruct women, or have the topic entitled, How to Love Your Husband. But it's fascinating to me that the Scripture doesn't command you to do that. Why? Because God designed you to love. He's not going to command you to do what He created you to do. And we'll unpack that in just a moment. But it is a profound yet simple truth, but it is full of implication in terms of your relationship with your husband. But the longing of your heart, then, is for him to be motivated to love you. In fact, one of the questions in academic research that's been documented, women are the ones asking, does my husband love me as much as I love him? Did you know that the husbands are not asking that question, generally speaking? There's a need in your heart and soul to be reassured of that, but partly because God has designed you to love, you know you love Him. You know you feel love. Now, if you married Him for other reasons, or you become embittered, or you transferred your affection to someone else, then that doesn't apply, and those are very serious issues. But in the generalized statement, women love to love. You are designed by God to care and to love. It's a very powerful thing. In fact, through the years when women would come in for counseling, I would weep with them as we talked about how to motivate the husband to be more loving. That was a longing. And then I'd say, well, here, I want you to do this loving thing. And so she'd do that loving thing, and it didn't seem to have the kind of impact. And I said, well, let's do this loving thing. And then it didn't have that kind of impact. And I was actually kind of setting her up for disappointment because she was already more loving than he was. That's why he's under command to love. We don't love as men as naturally as you do. That's why we need a divine command. You're not commanded to agape love. Very profound truth in the Greek. There are three Greek words for love. There is agape, there is phileo, friendship, Philadelphia love, friendship love as such, and then there is eros. Well, the second question, how does a wife seek to motivate her husband? Well, by loving him, and which begins and ends typically with talking. If you ask 1,000,000 women, what's the key to marriage, ladies? Communication. There it is. The men who echo that, who would also say it, have been so conditioned to answer it that way, but they won't necessarily say that's the answer. But you do. You've been designed by God to communicate. How can you commune apart from communication? In fact, you want to keep the relationship up to date. Right? You don't like that sense of unresolved. You don't like it when you think he's secretly mad. You want to keep it up to date. Most women do. Most women want to keep it up to date. In fact, you would prefer, let's talk about problems on a daily basis to keep us from having major marital problems. But there's a huge male and female difference. Your husband feels if we're talking about marital problems on a daily basis, that means we got a major marital problem. I sometimes wonder, Lord, why have you made us this way? But there's a deep truth to that. Deep truth. You want to keep it up to date. You want to communicate. And sometimes it seems as though he shuts down on you. He doesn't seem to want to talk as much as you do. The third question. Does a wife's way of motivating her husband work? Well, let's put it this way. Less than she expects. In fact, in the academic literature, again, women are what we call expressive responsive. You're an integrated personality. Your mind, body, soul, and spirit are connected. The left brain, right brain research, all these things. But if a husband wounds your spirit, it's going to display itself on your countenance. Whereas men tend to be more compartmentalized. We can put our emotions in compartments. And there are strengths to each of these and there are weaknesses. The strength is, when I was in Manhattan on 9/11, men went to their death. Most of them who went back into the World Trade Tower centers did so because men have this ability, the warrior in them, to put their emotions in a compartment and go right into their death. That is a strength. The weakness, of course, is that they can put their emotions in compartments and not let you know what they're feeling. They can even bury that, and they aren't always as responsive or expressive. Whereas you are designed by God to express. Did you know that women's faces wrinkle more than men's do as you age? That's because the research shows you smile so much. It's true. You're expressive. You're responsive. And it does have that effect. So much for academic research. Your tax dollars going to that kind of finding. Wonderful finding. But that's why women say, my husband's a mysterious island. I'm forever paddling around him, but he doesn't permit me to land. So when women come in for counseling with the husband, the man will seat himself in such a position and he'll look at me. Right? She will sit in such a position where she can watch him and me. She's trying to figure out what's going on in his soul. There was an article called Poker Face versus Crybaby. And you can see the research from Vanderbilt was pointing out that men and women feel the same things. But when a woman is wounded, whatever, it will display itself. That's why women weep. It's a beautiful feature. But women will cry. It's very difficult for you not to cry. It will come out. What they found at Vanderbilt, though, men feel the same things, but it doesn't come up out that way. We poker face it. And so what happens then, you don't know for sure what he's feeling, and if he's in a mood, you tend to personalize the thing. Dr. Deb Tannen, the great secular linguist, in her book called Talking 9 to 5, has said that women in the work arena, when there's a conflict, will personalize that conflict far more than men do in the same kind of similar conflict. And when your husband is moody and when he's shutting down, you have a tendency to think, what'd I do? What'd I do? Because you're very sensitive to pleasing him. You don't want to meet with his displeasure. You care about there being harmony and peace and reconciliation in the relationship. And so you're trying to figure out, what's he feeling? Why is he feeling that? Did I do something? Did I say something? It's not true for all women, but it's true for many women. So number 4, when a wife feels her way of motivating her husband isn't working, what does she tend to do? Well, talk more. Even demanding to talk. We need to talk. We need to talk now. Sit down and talk to me. That can be the tendency at times when you're intimate with somebody and you trust them. It's not how you treat other people, but in that intimate relationship with the man who matters to you, that will take place. In fact, think of a photograph of the two of you, so to speak, and it gets ripped. You're going to do everything in your power to tape that photograph back together. We talk about assertiveness training for women in the work arena. In the home, you don't have to teach women to be assertive in relationship to their husband when it comes to emotionality. Women will tend to be aggressive and move toward the husband to connect. That is a natural instinct and natural desire. So you'll move toward him. Back in the academic research, again, we see this whole issue of women will build rapport by giving report. This was a very well documented thing, that they will follow their husband around to give the report. You see? Give the report. How's your day? And she's giving the report. And you do that to build this sense of rapport. And then you say to him, well, how was your day? Fine. What did you do? Nothing. But it gets kind of just drops there a little bit. There's a huge frustration. But you tend to move toward him to talk because that's the key to communication and marriage and communion. And that's not true for everybody, but here's what they found. 85% of those who move toward a spouse to talk are the women. Dr. John Gottman at the University of Washington. 85% of those who stonewall, who go quiet, who just become a stone wall at the point of conflict, when there's conflict, is the man. So, number 5, is there potential for a husband and wife to get into a painful pattern of things? Yes, a cycle of criticism and withdrawal. On page 20 of our book, Motivating Your Man God's Way, I quote Dr. John Gottman at the University of Washington, who studied 2,000 couples over 20 years. He's the one that can predict with 91% accuracy. After meeting with somebody for 5 minutes, he can predict with 91% accuracy whether that couple will remain married or divorced. He's been evaluated 3 times from outside researchers because there are patterns and they become very, very clear. But he says this, in terms of this cycle. Men are far more likely than women to be stonewallers, 85%. And this is his book, Why Marriages Succeed or Fail. When tension builds, it often takes only the arrival of criticism. Men avoid emotional conflicts by going off by themselves. If you ask a male stonewaller to describe his state of mind, he often says, I'm trying not to react. Though his wife perceives his silence as an act of hostility. The wife is likely to interpret his response as a rejection of her. She couldn't imagine, listen to me, she couldn't imagine needing to withdraw over such a minor criticism. Such interactions can produce a vicious cycle, especially in marriages with high levels of conflict. The more wives complain and criticize, the more husbands withdraw and stonewall. The more husbands withdraw and stonewall, the more wives complain and criticize. This cycle must be broken if marriages are to avoid dissolution. Number 6, why do a wife and a husband tend to experience a common cycle? I believe the answer is this. Both assume that the other should know. You see, it's obvious to pink. It's obvious to pink, and it's obvious to blue. It's obvious to you why you're moving toward him to complain, to ventilate, to be negative, because in your world, and they've done research on this, that when little girls get in a fight with one another, they'll be playing hopscotch, not for the sake of the game, but they'll get into this conflict, and finally Sally will say to Mary, Mary, I hate you. I'm not going to talk to you again. You're not my friend, and they stomp off from one another. And the game ended because they weren't playing for the purpose of the game. They were sharing secrets. They were building that friendship. That's the nature of what was going on. So then there's this conflict. But then they noticed that 15 minutes later, a day later, they'll come back together and they'll both negatively ventilate with one another. It's what I call bringing it full circle. Ventilate negatively, and they'll both be talking sometimes at the same time, and then one will say, but I'm sorry, well, I'm sorry, and will you forgive me? Yes, and then you forgive me, and then both will kind of tear up a little bit, and then they'll kind of hug one another, and then one will say something witty, and the other will laugh, and the head will go back, and then they'll start playing hopscotch again. Again, this is where good research money has gone to find out just how this is going on. Little girls grow up and they think the husband is going to bring it full circle as well. But you're in the middle of this conflict when suddenly you're wanting to ventilate all this stuff and he says, drop it. You're just provoking me. You're just trying to make me mad. Just leave me alone. And you cannot imagine this because at the level of intimacy, that's not how you treat anybody. That's just the most unloving thing anybody could do. I can't believe it. Why? What do you mean just forget it? And you're not going to forget it. That's why when one guy said, every time I get in a fight with my wife, she gets historical. Guy says, no, she doesn't. She gets hysterical. No, she gets historical. She dredges everything up from the past. It's because God has wired you. You feel these issues are unresolved. You see, you have to bring it full circle. And I won't get into that. That's a whole teaching in and of itself, but very powerful, that we address in our Love and Respect Marriage Conference. So, again, why do a wife and husband tend to experience a common cycle? Both assume the other should understand this. You look at the world through pink, he looks at it through blue. And it's so obvious to you. Why can't he get it? But it's what I call neither one of us understanding what the Bible revealed 2,000 years ago, which is the secret that cracks the communication code. See, when you're negatively reacting, you're sending a code. And that code is obvious. 1,000 women looking at you would say, well, I know why that sweet thing is reacting the way she is. I know exactly why she's doing that and saying that. I can't believe he would do that to her. I just can't believe it. And of course, he shuts down and walks away, and 1,000 guys watching. Well, I know why he walked away. I said, it's obvious. Look at the way she was yapping at him, talking. I can't believe it. We don't talk to one another that way. So we both put our heels in as right. We're not getting along. We're educated beyond our intelligence, but we're lacking wisdom. And I will share with you in our family crazy cycle as well. I wet the bed until I was 11 because my mom and dad divorced one another, and then remarried one another, and then they separated again. I saw my dad attempt to strangle my mother, and I come out of that. And then mom and dad came to Christ my freshman year at Wheaton. My whole family came to Christ. Mom and dad now are in heaven. And Sarah comes out of an incredible amount of divorce. We understand the pain of this, and so partly what's driving this is our desire to prevent the little boys and girls from crying themselves to sleep at night, and I have vivid memories of that. We don't have to do this because I believe that most people who get married because they love one another. They don't say, you know what, you hate me and I hate you, so let's get married. No, we're full of goodwill. Aren't we? We're full of goodwill. In fact, people will be yelling at one another, and I'll say to my counseling, oh, time out. Does he have basic goodwill? Would you entrust the children to him? Yeah, of course. Does she have basic goodwill? Would you entrust the kids to her? Yes. What's going on here? People are bitter toward one another, and yet will acknowledge that they both basically have goodwill. There are people who are dying for their faith, as martyrs, saying, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And we've got good-willed husbands and wives living together who would entrust their children to one another, but are bitter and going to divorce lawyers. What's wrong with this picture? Well, number 7, then, what can a wife do that motivates her husband's God's way? I'm going to share with you that the best research that exists, it comes out of Gottman, but also is very interesting. In his book, Why Marriages Succeed or Fail, he said, we've discovered the 2 key ingredients for a successful marriage. They're just 2 key ingredients, and he says they are love and respect. It doesn't make any difference your status, the type of style you use when you're fighting. Some couples are avoidant types, others are volatile. It doesn't make any difference. As long as there is love and respect in the relationship, you will succeed. And that has to be a pattern, however. I loved you and respected you 4 years ago, but it stopped the day after. It's got to be a pattern. It's an attitude. But I was blown away because through the years I knew Ephesians 5:33. Ephesians 5:33 is the summary statement in the largest treatise in the New Testament on marriage. Ephesians 5 deals with husbands and wives, and then Paul concludes that whole chapter with this. He says, nevertheless, let each individual among you also love his own wife, even as himself, and let the wife see to it that she respect her husband. And I looked at that and I thought, that ain't popular with radical philosophical feminism. I got my PhD at Michigan State University with feminists. I did a thing on national study on fathering. I had great relationships with them. I understand some of the issues and concerns. But I realized that the feminist movement has removed from the marital radar screen this notion of respecting a man. If you don't feel respect toward him, you don't have to show him respect. You're not going to show respect to him because he's not superior. He's got to earn the respect, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, if you show respect, he might treat you in a subservient way. If you show him respect, he might abuse you. There's no way. Until he starts loving me in ways that are meaningful to me, will I even begin to entertain the idea of respecting him. And furthermore, if I respect him in 10 areas, but there are 3 or 4 areas that I don't respect him in, I don't respect him at all. I just don't feel him respect. I love him a ton, but I don't respect him at all. So, in light of that, I realized I had a little difficulty as I thought about this. How am I going to make this case in light of where we've been the last 40 years? Because then as I went into the Scripture as well as my academic research, I suddenly realized, whoa, no wife is commanded to agape love. There was no agape love. And in fact, Paul, who penned a love chapter, 1 Corinthians 13, that's read at all marriages, the greatest chapter on love that known to mankind, he never told a wife to agape love her husband. And then I thought, I wonder what Peter had to say. And whew, Peter was specifically asked in 1 Peter 3, verses 1 and 2, that the husband was disobedient to the Word. And you can see a lot of times the epistles are written in response to questions or concerns. And so he says, look, you can win your husband who's disobedient to the Word. Because the women are saying, my husband's disobedient to the Word. We don't know if he was a carnal Christian or unbeliever. And sometimes they would have the economy of words, so it meant both. So it applies both to a carnal Christian as well as to a non-Christian. He said, you can win a man who's disobedient to the Word, disobedient to Jesus Christ. You can win him without a word. And he says this in verse 2, by your respectful behavior. And I looked at that and I thought, unbelievable. Peter walked with the Lord of love for 3 years, but never told a wife to love her husband. I thought, these are no two small apostles. Paul, would you come here, please? Peter, would you come? Would you explain to us? Yes, you're right. The Lord did not reveal to us that a wife is to love her husband with agape love because Abba Father created her to love. He designed her by nature to love. Men, on the other hand, their nature isn't the same way, so Abba Father needed to reveal a divine command to them. And that they are commanded under divine mandate because He does not as naturally respond in the ways that are meaningful to her in the way in which she needs. But when she feels unloved, she doesn't respond naturally in a way that He does as a man. In the male arena, there is what we call the honor code. And you don't speak disrespectfully. In fact, I will tell you that when you get into a conflict with your husband because you love him and he's hurt you, you will move toward him to talk. We need to talk right now. And you'll begin to ventilate negatively and critically, and this is what Dr. John Gottman found. At a certain point, that negative criticism that you're ventilating to bring it full circle, you're motivated by love, you're trying to do the loving thing. At a certain point, your husband shuts down, says, drop it, forget it. He stonewalls, he just disengages. Because as a male who wears blue hearing aids, he begins to hear a message. And the message is, you have contempt for who I am as a human being, who I am as a man. And males never cross that line. We learned as young boys, if you do, you're going to get hurt. We have an instinctive honor code that if you dishonor another male, consciously, willfully, you have an enemy now, and there is a fight that could potentially incur here. And so you learn in the male arena, you just don't go there. You give what we call unconditional honor, unconditional respect toward another man. You're very careful in sending any message of contempt or disrespect because you'll have a huge enemy. So we do that naturally. We do not go there. So in the home, you will talk to your husband in a way that no man would ever talk to him. And that's why he's in disbelief. But you are doing naturally this is just a minor criticism, and I can't believe this. Come back here, and then you're staring out the window thinking, this is crazy. Let me share with you the illumination that I believe God revealed to me. As I was meditating on this, I thought, whoa, that it must mean then if a man is commanded to love, his wife needs his love. She needs love. But if she's not commanded to love him, but instead commanded to respect him, and we're going to talk about this being unconditional respect, because in 1 Peter 3, listen to me, the man is disobedient to the Word. He ain't deserving your respect. It is not about him earning it, deserving it, and it isn't about you feeling it. Peter's very clear, respectful behavior. In other words, in tone and facial expression, as you're communicating to him that he's unloving, you need to ask yourself, is that which I'm about to say going to come across to him as disrespectful in sending him a message that I have contempt for who he is as a human being? If I come across that way, even though my heart is full of love, and even though my heart is feeling hurt and wounded, am I coming across with the dark look, what we call the dark look in the eyes, the sour look in the face? Remember, you're expressive responsive. That look in your face is completely misinterpreted by your husband. So the check on your spirit has to be that. Now I'm going to share with you, though, what I discovered then. It must mean that your husband needs respect like he needs air to breathe. You need love like you need air to breathe. And you have this air tank, and it has a hose in it, and the love tank is right there, and this hose is connected. And you need that love in that intimate relationship. And periodically your husband comes in as a big elephant and stands on your air hose. Looking for some place to eat peanuts, right? And you're dying. You don't just go, oh, okay, I'm going to suffocate and die. He's just wounding my spirit, closing my spirit. I'm going to die. I'm going to be indifferent to this. It makes no difference. No way. If there's a baseball bat somewhere, you're going to hit the elephant upside the head. Get off my air hose. Can't believe it. Get off. You beast. But apparently he has an air hose to an air tank called respect. And you come in as a beautiful fawn. With all your little fawnettes. To have a nice little picnic. And he's not going to, oh, okay, I'm just going to suffocate and die here. No, it's, get off! Get off! Now, here's the discovery I made. I want you to think of a clock. And at the top of the clock, 2 words, right? Without love. That's you, without love. Without love. A clock, without love at 12 o'clock. Then at 3 o'clock, right, she reacts. Very simple. So at 12 o'clock, without love. And at 3 o'clock, she reacts. You see, you're not going to flatline it on the emotional heart monitor. When you feel unloved, you're not going to be indifferent to that. If God has designed you to need His love. And if you abandon yourself to love Him, if you held back and didn't really love Him, then this won't apply to you. But if you really loved Him, then you're going to want reciprocity there. You're going to want Him to love you back. He's just nature within you. So, without love, she reacts. Then at 6 o'clock, right, without respect. And then at 9 o'clock, right, he reacts. Again, he's not going to flatline it on the emotional heart monitor. And I'm going to point out something very important here. I'm not saying he's justified in feeling this way. So hang on, trust me. I'll make the case in just a moment. Trust me. If you're coming up with reasons why you're not going to do this, which is exactly where most of you are, just hang in there by faith. Take it by faith. Okay? But here's what I discovered. Without love, she reacts. Without respect. And then without respect, he reacts without love. And then without love, she reacts without respect. And then without respect, he reacts without love. And then without love, she reacts without respect. And this baby starts to spin, and I call it, and we call it, Sarah and I do the crazy cycle. And Sarah and I get on it because I look at the world through blue, and she looks at it through pink. And we'll get on the crazy cycle. But some couples really get on it, and they're going to divorce lawyers who are motivated to help mankind. So here's how it happens. Let me share with you the crazy cycle. Without love, she reacts without respect, and then without respect, he reacts without love, and this thing starts spinning. Now, if I came into the room and stood there and flipped on the lights 2 or 3 times and they didn't come on, you wouldn't think anything about it. But if I stood there for a half hour and flipped them on and off, and they didn't come on, right, for a half hour, you would say I am crazy. Craziness is when we keep doing the same thing over and over again with the same ill effect. Marital craziness is when we keep doing the same thing over and over again with the same ill effect. The topics change, but here's the point I make. When you're in a conflict with your spouse and you suddenly sense the issue isn't the issue, when you sense his spirit deflate, or when your spirit deflates, you're going along on a topic and it's a real problem, but suddenly something is said or done and his spirit deflates. And you cannot believe it, because when his spirit deflates, he's so arrogant and so childish. Because it's not your issue. And the same thing. Your spirit will deflate. And he'll look at you and he just, he can't believe it because it's not his issue. But I'm going to tell you that both of us are vulnerable. You're very vulnerable to the feeling that he's coming across to you as unloving. God has wired you in such a way that you're too vulnerable to that. Your husband is very vulnerable to be the recipient of what he perceives to be disrespect in your heart toward who he is as a man. He can't function that way. We can scream all day long, he needs to change. Change, change, change. But I'm going to tell you something. All of you who have sons are going to have your boys grow up and have the same feelings. You don't have to coach him. Okay, son, I want you to react negatively when you feel that you're being disrespected. You'll see it as he moves forward. As he gets 9 and 10, you'll begin to see it. As he moves into adolescence, you'll begin to see it. It will be there. So pray for your son, because he's going to have these same things. God made us male and female in Genesis, and together we reflect the image of God. And in fact, the woman's pink, he's blue, and together, when you put pink and blue together, it's purple, the color of royalty, the color of God. Together we reflect the image of God. And we, as husband and wife, reflect the image of God. God's not pink, God's not blue, God is purple, together. Not wrong, just different. And we need to come to a point where we realize this is God's creation. God created your precious boy to have certain things. He's going to have strengths, he's going to have weaknesses. The problem, of course, is front-sided strengths have back-sided weaknesses. Just as your husband can compartmentalize and instantaneously die for you and the family without thinking about it, without fear even being there. He's dead before he even begins to think. That same tendency can result in him not being sensitive. And remember, Martha rebuked Jesus, the Son of God, the God-man, said that he didn't care because he wasn't concerned about what was going on between Mary and Martha. And she said, if you cared, she accused the Son of God of not caring. The point is, we can be wrong in how we assess other people if we base it all on our experience. My only point there is to realize we've got to come to a point, unless there's an evil going out there, probably not wrong, just different. It's a different preference. But here's how this works then in terms of the crazy cycle. Something happens and your husband is unloving. So you feel unloved. I can't believe it. Again, he just did this. I can't believe this. And it hurts. You're too vulnerable. I can't believe this. So you react. But your reaction is even predicated on this idea of love. Okay, I'm going to react. I can't believe this. So you start reacting in ways that's going to bring about resolution. Remember, you're going to move toward him. We got to resolve this. I can't believe this. We need to talk. Sit down and talk to me. I can't believe this. And you try to get this thing resolved so he can be more sensitive, because you know that if he responds to you and loves you, you're going to outlove him. You're designed that way. Some say the essence of femininity is response. The essence of masculinity is initiation. So if he initiates correctly, you know you'll outrespond him. But we never seem to get there in that conversation. What instead he just thinks is you're sending an ongoing message of disapproval. And so what happens then in this confrontation, you were feeling unloved in the first place, but you seek to do the loving thing by talking. We need to talk. Sit down and talk to me. And then you think, well, it's only normal for me to begin to ventilate. We volley back and forth. I want you to share your heart with me, my heart with you. We'll say, I'm sorry. When he doesn't say he's sorry. Good grief. And I seek his forgiveness, seek my forgiveness, and this thing just gets blown up even more. I can't believe it. And then what? What do you mean I'm disrespectful? What does that have to do with anything? Well, and honestly, no, I don't respect you. I love you with all my heart, but I don't respect you one iota. No, I don't. Come back here. Wait, come back here. I can't come. This is the most unloving thing anybody could do. You see how this works? You felt unloved in the first place. You reacted in a way that was motivated by love. Now, in your world, though, you're just slapping him with a wet feather. That's what you're trying to... You know it works. You just don't know why. Finally, he's feeling something. You can see his spirit deflate. Good. Oh, good. Yes. But I'm going to actually tell you, that's not where you want to go. Just to let you know, among us sisters. Now, some of you aren't believers in this, and I remember when we had a MOPS group at our church, we had 200 women, right? And I was so excited. I was first discovering this stuff, so I'm their senior pastor, and here I'm doing this stuff, and I'm saying, hey, I'll come. They said, oh, come and tell us. So I come the first time to talk about this respect thing. And then they wanted me to come back. They asked me for 2 weeks, 2 sessions, so I come back the second time. And then I said, I'm available, come back the third time. The leadership and the whole group said, no, we don't want you to come back. My own women. That's because when I first was excited about it, I didn't know how you were processing this information. I was so excited about it. Man, this is great. You just respect this man. Just, Okay. So then I had to go back to the drawing board. Lord, I don't think this is getting through. Because they didn't even want me to come back. In fact, they asked another woman who's a good friend of mine to come the third session to answer this question, how to love your husband. And she wrote me a note, who's a good friend. She said, they missed it. You were telling us how to really love our husbands God's way. You best love a man by putting on unconditional respect at the point of conflict. And that's what brings him under conviction. That's what melts his heart. That's what Paul and Peter understood. That the way you empower yourself as a woman, just as if he, during conflict, came to you and got humble and was loving, you're going to come under conviction. It's very difficult for you not to respond to love. I'm going to share something with you that's completely foreign. We understand this. It's foreign. If we took a break right now and your husband was here, you'd turn to your husband and say, is that how you feel? It is a very foreign thing. We understand that. But I will tell you, this is what brings him under conviction. When you actually put on respect, actually distance yourself in quiet dignity, he will move toward you. It's just an amazing thing, but you have to test that out. But here's the thing I did first with these women. I thought, I got to go back to the drawing board. So I said to these gals, hey, anybody who would like to volunteer for the respect test, just let me know and you email me and we'll do this. And we had many women volunteer. So I said, here's the respect test. You should believe this because the Bible is teaching. Let me stop here just to pause. You should believe this because the Bible teaches this. Experience is really secondary. That should close the case, period. Guy says, well, I don't feel love for that woman. Doesn't make any difference, sir. The Bible commands you to love her as Christ loved the church. Your feelings are irrelevant. May I suggest that? God is calling you to move toward her, to be a loving man. Right? God is calling you to be respect. Well, I don't feel respect. I'm not going to respect him because he's not superior to me. Okay, so I thought, well, how do I get through? Because that is a definition, respect toward superiors. But how do I get through this? So I thought, let's do this. I said to the ladies, here's what I want you to do. And he's in his living room by himself, just reading the paper, he's not doing anything. Walk into the room and say, I was thinking about you today, and all the things about you I respect. And I just want you to know that I really respect you. And then leave the room. You see, that's his mother tongue. It is his mother tongue. And if you were in Saudi Arabia for 5 years, never having heard English spoken, and suddenly somebody's walking down the street speaking English, you're not going to, even if you're an introvert, just being different, that you're going to jump up over the hedge, run down the sidewalk, wait, where are you from? Once you hear your mother tongue, and you haven't heard it for 5 years, I'm going to tell you, if your husband has not heard the respect talk, which is his mother tongue among men, you ask 100 men, do you want your associates to love you or respect you? The answer is always the same. They'll laugh. Love, I could care less. Respect, absolutely. It is respect, respect, respect. It's huge. It's huge. So suddenly when they hear this, and I will tell you, this is what you did during courtship. You had what we call the glow. You believed in him. You admired him. You looked up to him. You shared things and respected him. But then he wounded you because of his immaturity that first year. And you started reacting in a way that was very obvious to you, but which the glow was gone, and he didn't know how to get it back. So he's really, in some cases, he is suspicious within his heart that you respect him. Now, because love is to be unconditional, respect is to be earned, you can say to him when he's unloving, I can't believe how unloving you are. But, and so even if you're unlovable, he's to love you, and if he doesn't love you, he's not a loving human being. See how it works? Even if you're unlovable, he's to love you, and if he doesn't love you, he's an unloving human being. So if he finally says, well, that's right, but you're supposed to respect me. I heard that thing that Emerson said. No way. You haven't loved me in the way that are meaningful, and I don't have to respect you because you're not worthy of respect. I don't have to respect you at all. In fact, I can have feelings of disrespect because you're not worthy of respect. That's where the culture's at. But the equality here, and I'm not saying the men are right, I'm just telling you, it'd be like him saying to you, I've said this to women, I said, if your husband was here and I said, sir, do you respect your wife? Oh, I really do. I really do. Do you love her? No. I said, what you feel when you hear that, and I've done this enough now, and I've said to women, what would you feel like that? I'd be devastated. And I said, how long would it take you to get over it? Forever. I'd never get over it. He said he respected me, but didn't love me. I said, that's right. So now think with me a moment. If he needs respect like he needs air to breathe, in the same way you need love like you need air to breathe, what do you think he feels when you say, I love you a ton, but no, I don't respect you? Would he be devastated? Mm-hmm. Would it take him forever to get over it? Mm-hmm. But he's not expressive responsive. And because you and he believe that respect ought to be earned, he's never going to go there again. He can't handle hearing that again. He'll only go there once or twice. And if he hears, I don't respect you, he'll never bring it up. And then you wonder why he's quiet. You wonder, well, there's part of him that's kept back. It's because deep within his heart he's suspicious that she no longer believes in me, admires me, feels about me what she did in courtship, and I don't know how to get it back. I can't put a voice and vocabulary to this. Now the question is, what should we do in response to that? Well, let me tell you about the women who have done this. One gal did the test and she was just blown away. And before I finish the respect test, let me say I went to a military academy and I realized that the great military leaders lead their men by unconditional honor. Men who lead men, coaches, it's unconditional honor. They believe in the men more than men believe in themselves. They know the performance stinks a lot of times, but they continue to send the message of honor. You can have 50,000 troops, and there's a 4-star general who was in the Vietnam, Gulf War, Afghanistan, so on and so forth. He can have those 50,000 troops and say, men, I was watching you today and you stunk. You absolutely stunk. Most of the men, just to give the men an illustration, although they're women in the services. You stunk, men. You stunk, you stunk, you stunk. But I see more potential in this unit than any unit I've ever been around. In fact, I'm a military history professional. I understand about military history. There's more potential in this unit than any fighting force that the world has ever seen. Get your head up, young man. Get your head up. Look at me. And you get your head up. You stunk, but I'm going to work with you the next 6 months. This will be the greatest fighting force the world has ever seen. And I'm going to get you there. And I'm going to tell you how you're going to get your head up and look at me. I believe in you more than you believe in yourself. I saw you today and you did stink. But boy, I see more potential in you than any man I've seen in a unit in a long time. Now, I'll tell you, you know what men, you see, women don't always understand this, but when men hear this, you know what men do in response to that kind of leadership? They serve, and that's why men call it the service. And the second thing men do, listen to me, is they die. There's something within us for honor. We actually die for honor. We die. Men's first impulse when they are, and this is for good-willed men, when you show unconditional honor toward a good-willed man, his first impulse is to serve and then to be willing to die. In fact, one guy said to his wife, "I love you so much I would die for you." She said, "Oh, Harry, you keep saying that, but you never do." So this gal did this respect test, and she came into the room, and she said, because she followed him up the steps, and he was going to the bedroom, and she said, "I was thinking about you today, all the things about you I respect." And he, was ignoring her, and then, and he couldn't believe it. And then she actually said this. She leaves the room, she gets to the doorpost, and he screams so loud, "Wait, whoa, come back, whoa, what is it?" I mean, the guys just immediately gravitate towards, "What is it?" Well, he's so loud that the kids in the other parts of the house heard Dad. He was so animated. They hadn't heard Dad that animated in a long time. So they're like 8, 9, and 10 years of age. So they came running into the living room because there had to be a pony there somewhere. To the bedroom. Came into the bedroom. So then they were jumping up and down the bed, and there was bedlam and everything, and she couldn't respond to the question. Then they exited, and like a good student, she started to leave with them. And he goes, "No, wait. Whoa, come back. What is it?" And then she proceeded to tell him 3 things about him that she respected. And then she said it was like an out-of-body experience. She hadn't seen that look in his face since courtship, and that could be a clue. But then she said the first thing he said is, "Whoa, hey, can I take the family out to dinner?" Now what was that? It was so amazing there. She said, "He never takes us out to dinner." First thing he thought about was service. Then she said, "Can I take a rain check on that? Kids have practice and so on." So he said, "Sure." Then she left the room. 15 minutes later, she heard pans banging in the kitchen. He was down there, and he fixed dinner. She said, "He doesn't cook." Doesn't cook. Then she wrote me an email 3 days later. She said, "I'm getting this off to you quick. You're not going to believe it. It's in the laundry room." Right there. Then she said, this is the way it went down, ladies. Then she said, "Do you have any more respect tests?" Then she said, "I believe literally I'm going to get a cruise out of this." A gal wrote, "I attended your marriage conference. I spoke with you briefly after the Friday night session and told you that my husband had filed for a divorce, but was giving me some mixed signals about possibly getting back together." She was a nurse. He's a medical doctor. "I'd asked him to come to the conference with me, and he had refused. You had suggested me that I see if he would listen to the tapes. Before I even brought it up, he knew that I had listened to the tapes. Before I brought it up, he knew that I had purchased the tapes, and he asked to listen to them. The divorce was in the final stages, and he assured me that it would be finalized. From the very beginning, I had many people praying for the restoration of our marriage, and I continued to trust that if it was going to happen, it would only occur with God's intervention. I don't know if it was the tapes or a combination of things, but after that, he began to draw closer to me and told me that he wanted to be a part of the family. On April the 3rd week, he called his attorney, called off the divorce. The next week, he moved back home, and we've been married for 20 years. And our marriage is stronger now than it has ever been." Then she said this, "The issue of respect was a huge issue in the eyes of my husband, and one of the main reasons that he left. Once I saw how important it was to our entire relationship, it made it so easy for me to give my husband what he so desperately needed. The more I made him feel respected, the more he realized how much he loved me. We both had to go through many changes to get to the point that we are today, but I thank the Lord for making me walk through the fire and trials that I went through in order to make my marriage what it should be." We've documented this. She says, the fond feelings of love, she used this word, and I took that phrase, the fond feelings of love have returned to his heart. And he says, "I never felt that I could have these feelings of fond feelings of love in my heart." I'm going to tell you, your husband thought that you not only loved him, once he became assured of that, but he thought that you admired him. And one of the points that I'm making is your husband needs your love. I'm not saying that. And you need respect, and I don't have time to unpack that. But when there's conflict, your husband isn't thinking, "Oh, you don't love me." You say to a guy, "Does your wife love you?" "Uh-huh." "Does she like you?" "No." "No." And what he reacts to isn't the feeling that you don't love him. He's reacting to the feeling that you don't respect him. And so that's what sets off the crazy cycle. If you want your husband to be motivated to love you in new ways and return to the way that he used to, would you please consider this message? We believe this message is the key to the spirit of a male, and his heart will reopen to you. But you need to do it prudently. One woman said, "I'll do this unconditional thing for 3 weeks, and if it doesn't work, I'm not going to do it anymore." That's not what we're talking about, so prepare your heart. But let's close in prayer, shall we? Lord, we thank you for the truth that Paul and Peter unfold. Lord, I pray that there would be no one here who would feel that they were chauvinistic, but instead would see this as the revelation from your heart, Abba Father, a gift to women, to empower them, to energize their husbands. And Lord, I pray for those women who are hurting here today because there's this deep conflict. I believe if he's a good-willed man, he's reacting not because he's trying to be unloving. He's probably reacting because in his spirit he no longer has the assurance that she really respects him for who he is. And he feels so vulnerable, but he reacts in ways that come across so unloving. But just as the message she's trying to send so often is, I feel unloved by you, unfortunately he hears, I disrespect you. And just as he reacts with the message, I don't feel respected by you, unfortunately, Lord, she hears, I don't love you. May we decode, Lord, what's really going on in the spirit of our spouse when the issue isn't the issue. Help us to get off the crazy cycle. In your name we pray. Amen. God bless you. We're wonderful. Thank you.
What a fitting way to end an absolutely inspiring message from Dr. Emerson Eggerichs on this edition of Focus on the Family.
You know, John, I've been concerned for many years about a problem that I was part of, and I've tried to rectify it. It is so easy to tell men how they're failing women because women just love that, and because it is an important message, and men do have a way of not meeting the needs of their wives, and that's something that ought to be said. But there's another half to that message that we've begun hearing today, in that the Scripture makes it clear that women have a responsibility to men that is equal in importance. And certainly Paul gave it equal time. But those of us who speak to families have not gotten around to that side of the story, which is that the woman needs to respect her husband. Now, it's even more important in this culture where men are seen frequently and depicted frequently as fools. I wrote about that in Bringing Up Boys. Not only are men seen as fools, but boys are seen as fools. And that doesn't fit very well with the masculine personality and temperament. We all need to be appreciated by the women in our lives. Shirley constantly builds me up. She constantly tells me she respects me and appreciates the things that I'm doing. And that is as important to me as it is for me to tell her how I love her and how I'm committed to her. It's a two-sided coin, and we've been pretty short on the second side of it. And Dr. Eggerichs is doing a good job of kind of balancing this scale.
I really appreciated his emphasis on listening well and going beyond what you're hearing at the surface level to get down to the heart level of what your spouse is telling you. That is so critical. And I'm trusting that, indeed, this broadcast will make a difference in a marriage out there that needs a little help. And if we can offer any information or resource suggestions about marriage to you, please go to our website at family.org. You'll find that site full of good, helpful, biblical information. Again, that's at family.org. Well, today's program was provided by Focus on the Family, and our thanks to producers Gary Nowinski and Lisa Cadman, our engineering and production team, Matthew Bardwell, Linda Rexford, Steve Lentz, and Andrew Stevens. Our host has been psychologist and author Dr. James Dobson, and I'm John Fuller, thanking you for listening and inviting you back next time when we'll again turn our hearts toward home. And with that, we've come to the end of this Focus on the Family program. We hope that this material has been helpful to you, and we welcome your questions or comments on this or any other family-related topic. You can write to us with your questions or comments to this address, Focus on the Family, Colorado Springs, Colorado, 80995. Or you can give us a call toll-free at 1-800, the letter A, and then the word family. That's 1-800-232-6459. Now, if you're in Canada, please write to us at this address, Focus on the Family, Box 9800, Vancouver, BC, V6B4G3. And the phone number in Canada is 1-800-661-9800. And thanks so much for listening.